This is a video I didn't really think I was gonna make, or I didn't anticipate making. I thought there was a decent chance that Thunderbolts, despite a pretty lackluster opening weekend that people are trying to spin as this enormous win, that it was actually going to eke out and maybe break even, or maybe even make a little bit of money because it had good word of mouth, it had good critic buzz, and it seems genuinely like people that watched it enjoyed it. All the friends that I have that like superhero movies that saw Thunderbolts, they didn't love the movie, they didn't think it was great, but they liked it. I've seen a good portion of it. It's a fine movie. You know, the David Harbour Red Guardian stuff is pretty good. You know, I like White Widow, so it had some stuff going for it. Didn't really have a lot of superstars in the movie other than maybe Winter Soldier, if you want to consider him like a star kind of attraction within the MCU itself. But in the past, just having a good MCU movie was enough to make money. And that apparently is not the case. And I say this is hitting rock bottom, and I can see people taking offense to that or being like, nah, you know, the Marvels is rock bottom because it lost so much money. But everybody knew the Marvels was going to lose money. It was mired in controversy for like a year. They had to do a lot of reworks with it. Nothing was ever working out. And I think everyone knew that one was going to bomb. I don't think Thunderbolts had to bomb. And if this had come out 3 or 4 years ago, it probably doesn't, because the MCU was just in a different place and had a different reputation with fans. I just think there are a lot of people that have basically bowed out and aren't even giving MCU movies a chance unless it's like an enormous cameo fest. You know, because the last 3 big successes that the MCU have had are Spider-Man No Way Home, obviously coming right off the heels of Endgame, all the cameos from the Sony Spider-Man universe movies coming in. You get the 3 Spider-Men, Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. It had all the cameos, not so much outside of Professor X of characters from other universes, but all those cameos from people that they wanted to see playing characters that we hadn't seen, most notably John Krasinski, I guess, is Reed Richards, although there was Black Bolt in there as well. But then you get to Deadpool and Wolverine, another cameo fest, bringing in even more Fox Studio, you know, X-Men movie characters in there, and they were all pretty big successes. But without that, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of legs for the MCU right now, and nobody really trusts it. So let's talk about all these details and the money that they're losing on this one. Marvel Studios' latest release, Thunderbolts, has officially joined the growing list of MCU box office disappointments. The film pulled in an estimated $378 million globally, well short of its estimated $425 to $450 million break-even point. Once marketing and distribution costs are factored in, Disney attempted to reposition the film mid-campaign by rebranding it Thunderbolts New Avengers in some territories, a move that critics say only diluted the Avengers brand further. Despite Bob Iger publicly touting the film's strong early reviews as proof that Marvel was back on track, the numbers tell a very different story. Critical praise didn't translate to ticket sales, and the movie's underperformance raises serious questions about the viability of Marvel's Phase 5 strategy. I think we've had serious questions about Marvel's Phase 4 and Phase 5 strategy for a very long time. It has been completely inept. It has completely alienated their audience to the point where an actual good movie like Thunderbolts just didn't have a chance. You know, and this is coming obviously off the heels of Captain America Brave New World, a movie I did see, you know, in full, which was not a good movie. And I just think you're just piling up loss upon loss upon loss to where maybe even Fantastic Four First Steps, a movie I'm kind of looking forward to, probably the one I think looks the best since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, might be in real trouble because it feels like they've just churned off so many people with so many bad movies. And I think a lot of people, including Kevin Feige, should have been able to see this coming because they are basically mining a lot of the characters and the stories that never just really worked out. And Kevin Feige and his hubris, along with Marvel Studios, thinking that they could just do anything. Oh, we can make, you know, a Marvel's movie, you know, throwing in Kamala Khan, even though her show just absolutely bombed. We can do a Shang-Chi movie. We can do an Eternals movie because that allows us to do more, race, gender, and sexuality swaps on characters. That's great. Well, it's all kind of blown up on their faces to where they finally get back. And Bob Iger was touting that the Thunderbolts was a return to form for the MCU, and this is what the MCU is going to be moving forward. And people just didn't care at this point because they've churned so many of them off. And once you start digging down into the numbers and what this actually all means and the way it stacks up, it just kind of gets worse and worse and worse. Is this the Marvels, bottoming out, not even making $200 million? Absolutely not. But this is an actual good movie that has strong word of mouth and still couldn't overcome the hurdle of the current reputation of the MCU. And I think the future is absolutely in doubt, leading up to Avengers Doomsday. And that would be the ultimate rock bottom, is an actual Avengers movie really not performing. We've already seen a Captain America movie now lose money. We've seen a strong movie with good word of mouth, when Thunderbolts lose money now. We've seen a sequel to a $1 billion movie lose money. The Marvels, although, Captain Marvel was propped up by being said it was integral to knowing what was going on in the Avengers Infinity Gauntlet and Avengers Endgame movies and all that kind of stuff. We were kind of bait and switched on that one. But once you start digging into it, this is not good news at all. In terms of franchise rankings, Thunderbolts now sits near the bottom of the MCU box office list, surpassing only the Incredible Hulk at $265 million and the Marvels at just under $200 million in global earnings. For context, even the underwhelming entries like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania surpassed $460 million globally, making Thunderbolts a historically weak performer in the franchise. This is especially shocking considering the film features several returning characters from past hits, including Winter Soldier and Red Guardian. The rebranding as a quasi-Avengers project didn't just fail, it arguably cheapened Marvel's biggest asset by attaching the Avengers name to a movie audiences clearly didn't care about. For a studio once known for turning even D-list characters into billion-dollar icons, this is a staggering fall from grace, and it is an enormous fall from grace. And there are some mitigating circumstances in there. We do have to take into account that post Phase 3 and in Phase 4, there was COVID, which certainly hurt the bottom line and the box office results there, but there really aren't any excuses anymore. We're well past COVID. They were able to go back and try and salvage Captain America: Brave New World. That didn't work. It appears they didn't really need to do that with Thunderbolts. They were happy with the movie. Or at least they thought they nailed it. And by a lot of accounts, they did, because it's a pretty good movie. And people still didn't care because they had burnt them out and worn them out, which is so much product. Just you can't even call them movies and shows. They're just content at this point, because there's so much stuff going out there that just isn't important. They're trying to tie it all together. And there have been a few, gems along the way, but for the most part, post Endgame, everything has been disappointing, and it's kind of all leading up to this point to where maybe even if they make good movies, it might not be enough to actually turn a profit. And I think they're probably really regretting, killing off Iron Man, aging up Captain America, making Thor into a complete loser, leaving Hulk in that weird hipster Hulk state at the end of Endgame. They really did a lot of their major heroes that had a lot of drawing power and had an enormous amount of success, an enormous disservice, and now they're trying to, kind of get it back all together. Let's bring back Robert Downey Jr., but now he's going to be Doctor Doom, and I imagine we're going to get 4 or 5 different versions of Tony Stark from other dimensions. He's also playing Iron Man, I imagine. We're definitely going to be getting Chris Evans as Captain America and all that kind of stuff, trying to put all the pieces back together. But I think with the lack of quality and the terrible characters that nobody was invested in and no one cared to become invested in, they might have just broken apart to where you can't really put it back together unless you do something like Deadpool and Wolverine, a big cameo fest where it's like, yeah, we're going to go grab stuff from other universes. But really, what's there left to grab at this point? They went and got a lot of the Fox X-Men characters. We've got all the Spider-Man. I think we've had Blade. Maybe we got to get some of those Ghost Rider characters in. That didn't really work. Maybe we'll get the original Fantastic Four from the other 2 Fantastic Four movies. Or I guess 3. Let's get the Corman Fantastic Four characters in, or actors in, for some cameos as well, and see if that stuff works. But I think they probably should have just taken a break. Maybe not after Endgame, because you did get Spider-Man No Way Home. You did get an enormous success there with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But once they started to realize that the interest was waning and people weren't as invested in the universe anymore, they probably should have just kind of wiped their hands of it, took a break, gave it 3 or 4 years, came up with an awesome plan to come back, with revamped versions of the characters, different ideas and story arcs to go along with, instead of doing everything kind of on the fly, which it definitely feels like they've been doing for some time. And now they're they're just kind of stuck where they've invested so much money that they almost need to invest more money to hopefully get all their losses back at this point. And obviously the big potential gold mine at the end of the rainbow here is Avengers Doomsday, but are people really interested in that? I'm not interested in Avengers Doomsday at this point. I'm interested in Fantastic Four First Steps because I think the tone looks good, but it does feel like they've absolutely destroyed the golden goose at this point. And then when you start digging into some of the other numbers, it looks even worse. Internationally, the outlook is even worse. In India, the film grossed a mere $5.2 million, a sharp decline from the $15.3 million earned by Captain America Brave New World, while China, long a dependable market for Marvel blockbusters, contributed just $12.4 million, down from the $25.6 for the same predecessor. The film's 51.1% international gross ratio compared to the Marvel's 59%, signaling a broader collapse of global interest in the MCU brand as competition from local cinema grows. Once a guaranteed moneymaker in nearly every major market in the world, Marvel is now struggling to break through outside of North America, with each new film making less cultural and commercial impact. So all those initiatives that they put in there, and they're always kind of kissing China's ass because that's the biggest market outside the US that had really adopted the MCU, even they're giving up on it now. Now they're even more dependent on the domestic audience. But unfortunately, if you look at that, culturally speaking, what Disney, especially Disney, have done, but also Marvel Studios with a lot of their decisions from Kevin Feige and the Victoria Alonso's, who's now gone, but certainly has made her mark on the MCU with Namor and a lot of other stupid decisions like that. They have put up a barrier between themselves and the customers, especially domestically, to where a lot of people are going to be very reticent or hesitant to go back in there. When you look at a Deadpool and Wolverine, that felt like a Ryan Reynolds movie more than an MCU movie. And I think they're going to really, really rue the day that they decided to alienate their audience and just go after this like new, weird, fake audience that doesn't really exist and just alienate American families and really tell fans of the MCU that they weren't important. It's more important that we get the Eternals in here and do something where we can make some real cultural impacts. You know, it's more important that we shove Shang-Chi in here and act like this is going to be a Black Panther level event or something like that. Whereas you go and you look at the Asian market, there's plenty of movies out there. You know, China, Japan, Korea, even the Philippines, they all have their own local box office. In a lot of places, they have their own superheroes and stuff like that. And I think all the pandering to the overseas audience clearly has not worked out because their cultural impact and their ability to draw money overseas is decreasing. And when you get down to like a 50-50 split between domestic and overseas, that's bad news for the MCU because they've been so dependent, especially on China, but really all those overseas markets, and they're also losing interest. And a lot of them probably aren't even watching the Disney Plus stuff. They probably aren't even watching these YouTube shows. I don't think that Critical Drinker or Gary from Nerdrotic or Thinking Critical really has a large foothold in places like China and India and Korea and Japan, yet all those markets are also losing interest in the MCU. It's clearly not just, there's a lot of people out there talking about how bad things are. Things are just actually bad. And Marvel Studios and Disney need to take heed and probably look back to their domestic audience, do the best they can to really impress them and entertain them. And then I think overseas, you'll see more of a response again because people just like good shit, whether they're in China or America. Nobody wants to get pandered to. I think that's definitely a big lesson to be learned, not only for Disney, but really for everybody. Because the bigger concern is what this all means for Disney's 2025 slate. With Captain America Brave New World already suffering negative buzz and lost money, and Thunderbolts now confirmed as another box office failure, the pressure is mounting. Industry insiders are already predicting that Snow White could become one of the biggest bombs in Disney history, while reports indicate that Pixar's Elio has ballooned to a staggering $300 million budget, meaning it'll need to make over $700 million just to break even, an impossible target for original animated films in today's climate. Thankfully, Lilo and Stitch has been a rare bright spot. There's still hope that upcoming releases like Fantastic Four First Steps, Tron's Ares, Zootopia 2, and Avatar Fire and Ash can salvage the year, But right now, Disney and Marvel are staring down the barrel of a disastrous 2025. And this was admittedly, on behalf of Disney, kind of by design. They had taken all the stuff that was going to bomb, like guaranteed to bomb, in like 2024, and they moved it over to 2025. They kind of pushed it all back, probably hoping that they could salvage some things and maybe fix their reputation and people be more interested going into 2025. It turns out people just don't like bad movies with characters they're not interested in. Not that people aren't interested in Falcon, but they're certainly not interested in him as Captain America. That did not work out. Obviously, Snow White was like that big bomb that everyone could see a mile away, and it blew up just like we thought it would, just kind of like the Marvels movie. But now you've got Thunderbolts not losing nearly as much as Snow White or Captain America, but still losing money. Thankfully, Lilo and Stitch has been an enormous hit, but then you start looking at the other stuff. Is Fantastic Four First Steps a guaranteed winner? Maybe it breaks even. Maybe they make a little bit of money, but that's not the billion-dollar movie that it was probably guaranteed to be, only 2 or 3 years ago. Now they're hoping it kind of makes money. I've seen the trailer for Tron Ares. I'm not impressed, and I thought Tron Legacy was a great movie. I don't want to see that movie. I don't think that one's going to blow up. Zootopia 2 certainly has a lot of potential. We saw what Inside Out 2 was able to do last year. Zootopia, I don't think is quite as popular as Inside Out, but it was a very popular movie, amongst Pixar fans, and it's likely to do very well. Maybe not quite Inside Out 2 numbers, but I think it'll do well. And then Avatar, Fire and Ash is basically guaranteed to make a lot of money. We've had two movies and they both gone over. We've had two movies and they've basically both gone well over $1 billion. I imagine this one does too, but it also has an enormous budget. It's not quite 300 million, but it's over 250. But the big red flag out there is Elio, which I saw the trailer and it kind of looks like a cute movie. It might be pretty good, but people have bailed on Pixar as well, unless it's a sequel to one of the movies that they already like. And a $300 million non-Toy Story sequel, like, that's fucking nuts. I can't believe they did that. So they are probably guaranteed to lose their asses on that one. So even if Zootopia 2 does very well and Avatar, Fire and Ash does as well as you would imagine it would be, they probably are still going to lose money because they've had so many stinkers, with the two MCU movies, Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World, which had a tremendous amount of reshoots. The Snow White disaster, potential disaster for Fantastic Four, not really sure. I still have hope that it's going to do well, but that is not a guarantee. They're going to probably have a couple of big hits in Lilo and Stitch, Zootopia, and Avatar, and still lose their asses because they've just put out so many bad movies in this year. And the bad part is, Thunderbolt's not a bad movie. Captain America, absolutely a bad movie. Not good whatsoever. You can see they pieced that entire thing together, and it was an incoherent mess. You could tell there was supposed to be some type of love story between Falcon and like a Secret Service agent that was completely cut out. You could tell Sidewinder was never supposed to be in there, and the leader was kind of laughable. I don't know what they were thinking about that. He looked like he should have been, one of the coral guys in Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that. He looked so stupid. So that's unfortunate for them, but it's not looking great for 2025. And Disney and Marvel Studios have a long way to go to gain that trust back. And until then, good movies like Thunderbolts are going to continue to lose money, unfortunately. If you appreciate this kind of analysis and talk not only about comic book movies and TV shows, but certainly about comic books themselves, this is the place to be, Think Critical YouTube. But if you would like even more of that, talk about all your geek culture stuff in one awesome spot, it's Thinking Critical Patreon. You get to support the channel there, and you get awesome podcasts featuring your favorite guests here on the channel. If you haven't checked it out, there's a button right here. There's a link in the video description. I do hope to see you there very, very soon.